The enemy's army extended from castle to Courtrai, and as there was no species of violence or pillage it did not commit, the poor people on the frontier quitted their isolated dwellings and fled for refuge into the strong cities which held out a shelter to them. Arras was encumbered with fugitives. An approaching battle was much spoken of, the prince having manoeuvred until that movement only in order to await a reinforcement that had just reached him. The young men congratulated themselves on having arrived so opportunely. The evening was employed in discussing the war, the grooms polished their arms, the young men loaded the pistols in case of a skirmish, and they awoke in despair, having both dreamed that they had arrived too late to participate in the battle. In the morning it was rumoured that Prince de Conde had evacuated Bethune and fallen back on Carvin, leaving, however, a strong garrison in the former city. But as there was nothing positively certain in this report, the young warriors decided to continue their way toward Bethune, free on the road to diverge to the right and march to Carvin if necessary. The count's tutor was well acquainted with the country. He consequently proposed to take a cross-road, which lay between that of Lens and that of Bethune. They obtained information at Ablain, and a statement of their route was left for Grimaud. About 7 o'clock in the morning they set out. De Guiche, who was young and impulsive, said to Raoul, "Here we are, 3 masters and 3 servants our valets are well armed, and yours seems to be tough enough." "I have never seen him put to the test," replied Raoul, "but he is a Breton, which promises something." "Yes, yes," resumed De Guiche, "I am sure he can fire a musket when required. On my side I have 2 sure men, who have been in action with my father. We therefore represent 6 fighting men, if we should meet a little troop of enemies, equal or even superior in number to our own. Shall we charge them?" Raoul, "Certainly, sir," replied the Viscount. "Hollo, young people, stop there," said the tutor, joining in the conversation. "Zounds, how you manoeuvre my instructions! Count, you seem to forget the orders I received to conduct you safe and sound to his Highness the Prince. Once with the army you may be killed, at your good pleasure, but until that time, I warn you that in my capacity of general of the army I shall order a retreat and turn my back on the first red coat we come across." De Guiche and Raoul glanced at each other, smiling. They arrived at Ablain without accident. There they inquired and learned that the prince had in reality quitted Bethune and stationed himself between Cambria and La Venthie. Therefore, leaving directions at every place for Grimaud, they took a cross-road which conducted the little troop by the bank of a small stream flowing into the Lys. The country was beautiful, intersected by valleys as green as the emerald. Here and there they passed little copses crossing the path which they were following. In anticipation of some ambuscade in each of these little woods, the tutor placed his 2 servants at the head of the band, thus forming the advance guard. Himself and the 2 young men represented the body of the army, whilst Olivain, with his rifle upon his knee and his eyes upon the watch, protected the rear. They had observed for some time before them, on the horizon, a rather thick wood, and when they had arrived at a distance of 100 steps from it, Monsieur Zormingis took his usual precautions, and sent on in advance the count's 2 grooms. The servants had just disappeared under the trees, followed by the tutor, and the young men were laughing and talking about 100 yards off. Olivain was at the same distance in the rear, when suddenly there resounded 5 or 6 musket shots. The tutor cried halt, the young men obeyed, pulling up their steeds, and at the same moment the 2 valets were seen returning at a gallop. The young men, impatient to learn the cause of the firing, spurred on toward the servants. The tutor followed them. "Were you stopped?" eagerly inquired the 2 youths. "No," replied the servants. "It is even probable that we have not been seen. The shots were fired about 100 paces in advance of us, in the thickest part of the wood, and we returned to ask your advice." My advice is this, said Monsieur Dorminguez, and if needs be, my will, that we beat a retreat. There may be an ambuscade concealed in this wood. Did you see nothing there? Asked the Count. I thought I saw, said one of the servants, horsemen dressed in yellow, creeping along the bed of the stream. That's it, said the tutor. We have fallen in with a party of Spaniards. Come back, sirs, back. Two youths looked at each other, and at this moment a pistol shot and cries for help were heard. Another glance between the young men convinced them both that neither had any wish to go back, and as the tutor had already turned his horse's head, they both spurred forward, Roll crying, "Follow me," Olivain and the Count de Guiche follow, Urbain and Planchet, and before the tutor could recover from his surprise they had both disappeared into the forest. Whilst they spurred their steeds they held their pistols ready also. In 5 minutes they arrived at the spot whence the noise had proceeded, and then restraining their horses, they advanced cautiously,